episode of the Trout Spinners podcast with your friends Miles and Gary. But it's a bit of a different episode today because we're actually doing it. It's an interview. It's one of our little interviews.
Yeah.
Who are we interviewing?
We are interviewing Luke Campbell. He is, as you'll hear me say in a minute, the series producer and director of An Idiot Abroad. Some episodes of An Idiot Abroad, not all of them. Yeah, he's worked very, very closely, therefore, with Carl Pilkington, and that's why we've got him on. It's hard to get on guests who are very specifically related to the XFM shows. There's so few characters who are. So we're branching out a little bit to people who know Ricky, Steve, and Carl and have worked with them closely. Clearly, a lot of the chat today, I think, will be relevant to sort of XFM related material. We won't be talking about the XFM shows, but it will be relevant, won't it, to sort of find out stuff about Carl Pilkington.
I must watch An Idiot Abroad at least twice a year, and you know, I feel like they're kind of the first. They might not be necessarily the first, but definitely started a trend of that travelogue format with comedian. There's kind of loads of them now. So this one feels kind of like the first, but it still brought out the best in Carl. You see his raw, kind of uncensored reactions as he's like thrown into these mental scenarios, which I'm sure we'll discuss with Luke. So I think it'll offer a really interesting insight into what it's like to work with, you know, an idol of ours, right?
Yeah, in a way, I kind of think, and we won't kind of discuss this with Luke as such because he's not sort of familiar necessarily with the XFM shows, but I would say I wish An Idiot Abroad had been the follow-up to the XFM shows rather than the podcast that they did. I think it kind of works nicer as a follow-up, as a TV, so it's a very different format, but it kind of follows on from the XFM shows in a better way than I think the podcast did. How
are you feeling about the interview? Oh wait, hang on a minute. We did a special Patreon show. We also, our last episode was an XFM in the community episode, but we also recorded a Patreon special because Gary.
It became a Patreon special because we went on so long about it.
Yeah, we just waffled on. I was having a little drink. Gary was a performer as part of Make 'em Laugh, which is a little sort of comedy show with different sketch acts. What was there? Sketch acts, stand-up?
There's sketch acts and stand-up, and someone who ran it. Let's not comment on it, but yeah, it was an amazing experience and very sort of surreal experience to do. But you know, it was something you had to get through. So I got through. I think we did put on Twitter, but I got through there was some heats to get through to the live nights, and I did, and I performed. There wasn't like a vote on who was best or anything. It's just performance. But yeah, I think I did all right. You know, considering everything. See, I had a technical issue at the beginning of my set as well.
Yeah. But it was totally as my first time watching one of those open mic nights via Zoom and watching you. Yeah, so we recorded a special like post our initial thoughts and reactions after Gary's night, and that went out as a Patreon. So if you do want to listen to that, do head over there. And
it's been described as the sweetest thing I've ever heard by someone.
Yeah,
I don't say it.
Could be quite saccharine for the wrong audience.
Yeah, it could be a bit.
But how are you feeling about today's interview? Are you excited?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I think he'll be a good guest. He's been very forthcoming in emails, which is not always an indicator. Sometimes we've had guests who write like one line back to us, and they speak loads. They're great. I think Laurie was one of them. Laurie's a great guest, but yeah, Luke seems keen to do it.
They're so different, aren't they, the interview shows that we do as well, because I don't know, I personally love doing interviews. I just think it's just so, this is what podcasting is about for me, you know, just having that space and allowing your guests that time just to talk and hear their stories, because you don't get that in other ways. Also, our focus on this podcast is so niche, isn't it?
Yeah. But as I say, we're branching out in terms of subject area, but we kind of have to, because we could just say we won't do any interviews unless we get Ricky, Steve, or Carl or Claire. But we like doing the interviews. We think, but not just that, we hope that they're entertaining as well, and in a different sort of way, as you say, Miles. They're not quite the same as the normal shows, and we're not experienced interviewers. We've interviewed 5 people, and we enjoy it. I think probably I'd say hopefully we're all right at it. Let us know. Maybe that'll change after this show, but let us know.
I plan to take over from Graham Norton and give away a big stiff cock of a video.
Big stiff. Yeah, I'm Jonathan Ross. I'll be shaving my arse before we go on to our next interview. So between us, we'll have covered a lot of the whole comedy world.
Yeah. So shall we get on with it? Shall we dip into this interview?
Yeah. Maybe we'll talk more about the stand-up stuff another time, because I do want to talk a bit more about it. But I think today's probably, it's an interview day, so we won't.
Not about us. It's about Luke Campbell, who's coming up now.
I want it to be about me. me. Well, I know, Miles, you and I and most of our listeners would give our right arm to spend a day with Carl Pilkington. Our very special guest today has spent weeks, months, literally months with him, travelling the world. And that is because he is the series producer, the acclaimed series producer and director of An Idiot Abroad, seasons 1, 2 and 3. Not every episode, but quite a few. He is Luke Campbell. Luke, thanks first of all for joining us. Really appreciate it. No, you're a very busy man, so thanks for doing this.
It's great to be with you guys, with you mega super fans. I'm honoured to contribute to the conversation that is, honouring the genius that is Carl Pilkington.
Oh, thanks. We're honoured to have you. But yeah, I guess just to start off, how did you find yourself as the director and series producer of An Idiot Abroad? How did you come to that role?
It all began, actually. Well, I knew the exec producer of the series, and I got wind that it was happening via an editor friend of mine, as much things do in TV, it's all word of mouth. Oh, this is coming up. And I thought, a travelogue with a bit of fun was what I sort of first heard. And it's this guy, Carl Pilkington. I hadn't really heard of Carl, actually, when I first heard about the show. I wasn't, obviously I'd heard of Ricky and Steve and The Office and things that had been around at that time, but Carl was a total unknown to me. And I think I was approached, I actually put in a call to the exec and said, I've heard this show's coming up, because I had worked with Richard Yee and some years previous on a sort of urban legends show. I said, I've heard this is coming up. I'm really interested. Quite often I like to work with people I've never worked with and go to countries I've never been to. It's always a great motivator in television. It keeps you hungry, keeps you fresh. And so they set up a meeting, and I gather that Carl was keen to meet me because my background mainly had been, up until then, in sort of factual documentaries. I've done a bit of science, did space for the BBC, Space with Sam Neill, which was a bit like Cosmos back in and I'd done a lot of what some people might call freakumentaries, which again probably interested Carl because I'd done sort of things like the world's what was it called, Half-Time Mum, featuring the world's hardest woman. I'd done Girl Who Lives in the Dark. I did Octo Mum, and I also did Pregnant Man. So Carl was like dying to chat about all these freaks. Well, I shouldn't call them freaks. They're not freaks. They're
we know what you mean. Yeah,
visually challenged people with interesting stories to tell. And so that's really what got me into it in the beginning. And we sat down in a little room in Soho, and he was like, "All right, so you're like a proper documentary maker, aren't you?" And I was, I was like, "Well, yeah, okay, I am." And we just got chatting. Really, we just had a 5-minute chat, see if we were going to get along, and really for Carl to see what he made of me. And then a day or two later, I got a call saying, "Campbell, you're in. Do you want it?"
Oh wow!
Wow!
Yeah.
So it was like Carl kind of was almost interviewing you in a way to see if you were suitable for them. That's really interesting that they involved Carl so much in the director process. You'd kind of imagine they'd just choose a director and kind of go with it, but they really wanted you to gel with Carl. So
they did, and actually, it was. Obviously, it's the first time I've worked with people like Carl and Ricky and co, and it was really interesting to see that side of it. Actually, how. Usually it is the other way around. Presenters, if you want to call them that, are kind of combined with crew and talent, and off you go and do the thing. But I began to realise quite quickly that Carl has a lot of input into what we're doing and how we do it and who's doing it. And you've got to get it right. All those layers are important to make sure there's a good chemistry in the group to enable him, if you like.
Absolutely, yeah.
Had you met like Ricky and Steve when you were in talks to like take on the show, and like how much were you told about the sort of countries you'd be going, the sort of challenges you'd be sort of facing? And because I'm assuming there would have had to have been, withhold a lot of information from Carl because you want that natural reaction.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. Because in the beginning, certainly series 1, I was told we might be going to India. I'd never been to India. I thought that would be ace. I was certainly told, Carl's literally been, nowhere. He's gone to a couple of sort of Spanish hotels for a ride.
Madeira.
Sunday. Madeira, and it was like, okay, right, so he's totally untravelled. And, I didn't really meet Stephen and Ricky at all until the first time I met them properly. There's been some phone chats and whatnot, but I met them properly at a meeting when the series got named, which was a pretty funny meeting, actually, because we were sitting in an edit with someone from Sky, like the commissioner from Sky, the big cheese, and they, Ricky was like, well, what we're going to call this then? And Carl, we'd already been out on a recce, myself and an assistant, and we had, we'd been all around. We'd even had little cards printed up. This was the Wonders of the World series, right, that said Carl Pilking's Wonders of the World. And we had it in Indian text and English, and it looked pretty cool. And we had the 7 wonders all done on this little card because obviously on a recce you want to impress people that you're a professional. And Carl was like, well, I mean, what's wrong with like Carl Pilkington's 7 Wonders of the World? And Ricky was like, no, that's going to give people the wrong impression and it's way too fucking wordy, And then there was sort of beat and pause, and you can see Carl like twitching a bit on the sofa. His hands often shake when he gets nervous.
Oh, really?
When Ricky's when Ricky's about to drop him in it or something, and then Carl was going, what about Carl Pilkington's Wonders of the World? And then Stephen kind of went, Moron in the Sun. And the woman from Sky rolled her off. And then Ricky just came out with An Idiot Abroad. And it was, it was just glued in straight away. Everyone was like, wow, that's it. And you could see, I think he said, literally, what's my mum going to think of that? We couldn't believe it. So I was there at the birth of the name, and it just goes to show you, how these things come about. I mean, they do a bit of drilling into it, and then out of that comes, the madness, the moment, the truth, the clarity.
Yeah,
it's quite scary to think that Ricky can literally bring on a panic attack in Campbell, making him sort of fake like crap. Like it's all genuine. There's nothing fake about it. I mean,
I really used to feel for Carl because on the shoots, whenever it was time to call Ricky, you could see his thumbs like shaking as he was dialing the number, and we used to feel for him so much. Like, oh, you poor bloke. I hope Ricky doesn't fucking give you a grilling.
That's great insight because we don't. That's the behind the bits we don't get to see. So even just his hand shaking, that's really interesting to know because you don't think of Carl like that. Think of him getting stressed, but not kind of showing physical signs of it.
Well, that's it. Stress comes out in all the sort of maddest ways, doesn't it? He gets trouble with his stomach as well, on the shoots because he's nervous about what we're going to unleash on him or drop him into,
Yeah,
India must have been interesting then, I suppose.
What was your because obviously the series went out in a certain order, but you may well have filmed it in a different order. What was the first location you went to, and also how was that? Because you didn't know Carl before, you'd met him in a few meetings probably, but you were getting to know Carl. So how was that kind of experience as a director, like suddenly directing abroad and with Carl?
You don't sort of know until you work with someone how much they're gonna give you. How much are you producing it, or how much are they are what it says on the tin, or how much or what it appears. But we'd obviously never seen An Idiot Abroad, and because this was the first. So I think he'd gone to Egypt before me, and then we went off to India. And I mean, he came back from Egypt pretty freaked out. That was only Egypt, and I'd done a few documentaries in India. The Girl with Two Faces. Yeah, medical documentaries about, some pretty extraordinary stuff. The Girl with Two Faces was one Carl was really fascinated by.
Oh, I bet he was.
A baby born with 2 faces. And they were good things to sort of chat to him about on the plane over. But basically, I was just getting to know him, getting a gauge of him, and actually, obviously, quickly realised that Carl. What is amazing about Carl is you put him in a situation, and it will unfold in a way you never imagined it would, and he will come out with things. I just don't know where his head lives. I mean, you'd be very nervous. Like we went to meet like one of those holy men up the river in India. The Swami, as they're known. And when we were on the recce with that, we met about 4 different Swamis to make sure we found him a good one. But it was mainly his assistant that nailed it, Davram, the amazing Davram. Oh. But you're sort of slightly nervous that when Carl goes in, is he going to offend these people, because you know he's not going to get the whole religion thing or the finding yourself thing. But what is he going to say, and where is this going to go? And somehow he navigates amazingly this, his own inquiry as to what this is all about and how it works, whilst also being Carl and coming out with the stuff that we all love him for. But what I realised very quickly, he delivers everything himself, as long as you've got, not as long as, if he's in the right situation, our job's actually really easy. You just got to look after him, make sure he doesn't get too nervous or sick. What he hated actually at the beginning, particularly on my episodes, was not knowing. We tried to hold back quite a lot from him. He'd just know that he was going to go to meet a Swami in a village. And then, this bloke, Davram, would be at the side of the road with buck teeth and a mad bald head. And Carl would be getting in a taxi with him. And he's like, where are we fucking going? How long is this taxi ride? And he'd say, Carl, mate, just calm down. It's all under control. It'd be about half an hour in the taxi. And he's like, what? And I've got to get in the back with him. Yeah. So just, and then you'd get up there and then he'd meet the funny little Swami man. Which was a beautiful moment.
was that really hard to keep him like controlled and reassured and safe? Because I'm just thinking about moments in the series. There was the wedding suite. The honeymoon suite. Wow. And he just walks out and you're watching it and you see the camera just literally going downstairs. So you're just reacting in real time. You're like, Carl, come. I don't even know if it might be one of your voices actually. And you're saying, Carl, come back. Where you going? Like, how do you deal with a situation like that just on the spot? Because he's so
unpredictable, basically.
Yeah,
that was actually quite a terrifying moment, because that honeymoon suite it's like in a little sort of pretty rough area of the housing that surrounds the Taj Mahal. And so we're bedded in, because that was the other thing, right? It's a honeymoon suite with a view, and the fucking Taj Mahal's like a tiny little place.
Yeah.
Gag, right? Ricky's booked him a room with a view, and it's like, fucking hell, what's that? But we were in a really rough area, and when he did fly out, I think, what was it that nailed it for him? There was the ensuite shed when he opened that door, which was full of it was like paint coming out. There were rollers and decorating gear. I'm surprised he didn't actually get to work, start redecorating the room. But I think there was something in the room that just did him in, or we'd said something to him, and he just went, right, fucking, that's it, I'm fucking done with this. And he stormed past us. And the thing was, he had no money, he doesn't know where he is, and he went down the stairs so quickly, and we looked out the window, and we saw him just going up off the street round the corner, out of view. And so we obviously legged it down after him. And that's the thing, because sometimes on Idiot Abroad, it would literally come down to myself and Ben, who I worked with closely on that, Ben Green, and it would be us two with a camera, and because you've got to sort of stand down the main crew because of overtime hours and all the rest of it, but we wanted to immerse him in stuff, for real, authentically. So we'd have to stand down the main crew, and it was just Ben and I. And it was like, fucking hell, Carl's got out. He's on his own. He's disappeared. So we ran down after it. And, it was just a case of sort of sitting down at the side of the road and saying, look, mate, it's not that bad. Think of other people in the world. I mean, sometimes you feel like you're literally like being Stephen. Because that was the sort of thing in it, wasn't it? Ricky was poking him and Stephen was trying to sort of even with him to carry on the mission. The thing is, you'd feel for him, because he'd just look at you and he'd go, but fucking hell, Luke, you wouldn't fucking kip in there, would you? And you're like, no, mate, I know, mate, but I mean, you've got to, it's the show, and then he'd sort of get him back on side, and he'd go, oh, fucking hell, all right, come on, let's go back. Fucking hell. And you just sort of talk him down and calm him down. And, he never really blew his top. He blew his top at me, actually, on the Series 3 with Warwick. he really lost his shit. And they had to do that skywalk, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Because I was hoping that we could get him to do a bungee jump off there, which obviously, as we know, he does not like a bungee jump. And he turned around at one point and he just went, right, whose fucking idea was this? Luke fucking Campbell. Luke Campbell, who's never going to direct James Bond, who's never going to direct the movie. Luke fucking Campbell. Is this it? Is this all you got? And it was like, Carl, man.
Jesus Christ.
Come on, work with me. And we had to take a little time out. And me and him just going, like, mate, I know you're stressed, but come on, please, bring it back in.
Yeah.
He did do 5 foot off that.
It wasn't even 4 foot.
Oh, that's so funny.
That sounds. It must have been because you've obviously done a lot of director. You've documentary maker, as you say, but directing Carl must be different to everything you've done before, and I guess since, in that respect, that you've got this genius there, but is very hot-headed and unpredictable and can just walk off and doesn't want to do it. But that's kind of part of what makes him who he is. So you've got to balance that out with kind of actually genuinely getting him back in on side, whereas still seeing him, we still want to see him on camera angry at these experiences, but we want him to at least be on camera. So it must be quite a unique experience, like in terms of your direction.
Yeah, it definitely was, and because you sort of know that you know he's going to have to really endure some pretty horrible stuff. You want to keep him. You want to stay friends with him. You want to have a sincerity with each other. But equally, you know, you deliberately hold things back because you just know.
Yeah.
So funny when the penny drops and then he's going to look at you and go, "You fucking cunt, I can't," you know, he'll. I mean, and what used to happen was sometimes me and Ben would start we'd tell him a load of stuff and then we'd look at each other, Ben and I, and start giggling, and he'd go, and he'd get really cross because he knew that there was some further shit to come,
Oh my God!
So it's the delicate balance between sort of, he knows that we're doing it for a reason. But actually, as the series went on, after series 1, we sort of did have to fill him in a bit more because I think, one, he couldn't sort of stand the stomach churning pain of not knowing what was about to happen to him. And 2, because, sometimes he also wanted to know a bit more about what was ahead because you don't want to just come out with the same things all the time. And so if he had a better sense of some of the stuff that's ahead, it would enable him to sort of ponder where his head might go.
Might be even worse. But did you think that you've obviously got Carl in these situations? He doesn't know what's going on. I assume you knew everything, like you knew the entire plan.
Yeah. I mean, basically, like obviously, Carl's an ex-radio producer. He understands the concept of what he's doing, right? And obviously, TV, location documentary shoot is a podcast or a radio show on steroids in terms of logistics. Yeah. So we go on a recce and we obviously, sort of line up multiple options. A lot of it's casting, really, because you're trying to find the right people that you know he's going to either click with or just not be able to fathom at all, and then he'll be going off on his Carlisms, as we call them, where he'll... so we knew what was ahead every day. We would have our shooting schedule, but he would not know the whole of it at all. Yeah. Certainly series 1. In fact, the very first shoot, my India shoot with him, when we arrived into Delhi, and there was a plan for him to sleep on a kebab shop floor. I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
And it
ridiculous.
Was just unbelievable because Delhi, it's so overwhelming and it's so full on. And like the traffic, the smells. Oh, my God. I mean, just trying to go to the toilet is such an overwhelming experience. This is out in the street. I mean, there are nice areas of Delhi. I'm not generalising.
Yeah.
Of course, we weren't in a nice area. We had taken him to like an absolute hellhole corner of Delhi, and there was a kebab shop up this alley. In terms of knowing everything, so we were trying to basically get the guy in the kebab shop to tell him that he was where he was going to be sleeping. And we knew ahead of time that there was another room up the alley that was a bit less intense than this. It was off the street. It had curtains. It had air conditioning, and so. So the guy was like, "Yeah, we're sleeping here tonight, And Carl was like, "What? In here?" And the funny thing was, right, and it was also a bit of a health and safety thing because I think, we'd have had to sleep with him. It was open to the street. But I remember what happened was that Carl, in his mind, sort of embraced that concept. Difficult though it was, he got his head around that, yes, he was going to be sleeping in this 100-degree, muddy kebab shop floor. And so when it was revealed to him, the guy, I think the kebab shop guy revealed to him, if I'm remembering it correctly, that there's another room up the road. And he was like, is there? Oh, and then obviously the toilet was a big factor in this relocation because, I mean, obviously Delhi Belly, it's a cliche, but it's definitely so the toilet was the clincher. But Carl actually said to me that he didn't want to go on to the next place where there was apparently a toilet because he thought we were going to stitch him up again with another nightmare, you know? And he'd rather stay at the kebab shop because at least he knew what he was getting. Mate, we've got to move, Carl. We can't keep staying here.
So we don't want to be here either.
That's typical.
No, well, absolutely. That's the thing. There's a line. That's the thing.
Yeah.
He always knew if it was too bad for the crew, then we're probably not staying there. But we did kip on the desert island with him, me and Ben, in his little shack. On our own. That was full on.
When Carl stays in little pokey rooms like that, do the crew kind of go off to a Hilton that's down, you know, or do you kind of stay in the room next to him and stay in those that sort of similar?
Well, unfortunately for myself, there's a tier system on that because, you know, like, the crew, the camera dudes and the soundies and all of those people, they have to go and be put up somewhere, you know, clean and civilized and where they can recuperate. They're really hard days, you can imagine, on these shoots. Yeah. And of course, there's hours worked and you've got to recharge all your batteries and the equipment's got to be cleaned and blah, 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 especially in India. But if we're putting Carl somewhere harsh, then, one of us or two of us, and it's usually myself and Ben, would stay with him.
Right.
Because we want to keep on filming because you never know what's going to happen. So we would literally strip it right back down to, he'd have his little radio mic that had a box on it that records 24/7. You don't ever want to dig up those archives. I keep 24/7 Carl recording. And then we'd strip it down to a little kind of what we call a little HDLSLR camera, which is, you know, like these little Canon 5Ds. Yeah. So it would be a tiny unit and a little handheld light basher, and we could sort of do anything. And then it would be myself and Carl and Ben, and that was the minimum. And you can't leave him on his own. There was one time actually in Vanuatu when he was on the beach. And he just landed on the beach, and he was like, "That's, you know, when he chose his little muffin island over there." And we all got in the boat and we pretended that we were actually leaving. Like everyone was leaving. Yeah. We're like, we're going to lunch now, and he was like, "What? Where are you fucking going? Hang on!" You know, and off we feigned going off on the other island, but we looped back and got him. Bless him.
What was it like being on that island? Like a completely desolate, like uninhabited island. I should also say this: your series was incredible, like beautifully edited, so cinematic, like really, really cinematic to watch. You can see why you want to climb to the top of Machu Picchu to get those panoramics, and also the music adds so much to it as well. Yeah. Well, the island, so Vanuatu, so that was the happy place, wasn't it? I mean, that was one of my favourite eps actually, partly because of scenes like the land diving. I mean, I think that's possibly my favourite ever.
Yeah.
I'm getting advice here from a cabbage.
And then when he does his dive, we were like, fucking hell, because he properly thumps into that mud.
Yeah.
I mean, health and safety, to be honest, I don't know if we'd be allowed to do half the stuff we did to him back then, because health safety has moved on a bit since Idiot Abroad, yeah. But staying out there was amazing. I mean, a really, really sort of unusual culture there, very sort of simple living, genuinely happy people. And the island that he chose as his little desert island there was literally nothing on it. Obviously, he gaffer taped up his enclosure, his camp. And then what was mad was when he wanted to sort of spend the night on the desert island. So that was the mission. And we saw a butcher on the main island, and someone said, "Oh yeah, we can get you some decent food out there." So the main crew pissed off and left myself and Carl, and this little fella turned up in a boat with some carrier bag full of like fresh beef. There was an abattoir on the neighbouring island, and it was the most beautifully fresh harvested beef. And this was the best thing Carl's ever done in cooking wise. Now I'm on a cooking show with Gino.
Yeah.
Carl's cooking. So I think this is in the show, isn't it? The steak on a shovel. Because sometimes I can't quite remember if it made the cut or not. So that was amazing because he genuinely, that steak was some of the most delicious steak I've ever tasted. And he warmed up a shovel on a fire and then slapped a steak on it, turned it over and went, "There you go, steak on a shovel." And because we had a meal together on camera as well as what's on camera, so it was just like, and we had, and so memories like that, you just, you know, I mean, I'm privileged really to have had those experiences with him, and they stayed with me for and they will do. So I'm an old man on the porch with my grandkids.
You should listen to the XFM shows, Luke. There's an episode where Carl talks about putting sausages in a toaster. So if you like steak on the show,
like that. So can you confirm, Luke? Because there are people. I know the answer to this. We know the answer to it, but there are people out there who still to this day will not believe that Carl Pilkington is a real person in the sense that he's not scripted and things. So when he was coming out with all these great lines and things that we all love, can you confirm absolutely he was not given those lines or fed those lines? They were all came naturally from him. Because some people don't believe it.
I know. It's actually the question I'm asked more than any other, having worked on An Idiot Abroad, is he really like that? You know, and yeah, I mean, you know, all I can tell you is that when we're not shooting, there's very, very little change. You know, it's like, let me think of some times. You know, you'll be in a motorway service station in deepest India, and we're all ordering, you know, hot, well-cooked food. That's what, of course, in India you're advised to eat freshly cooked food that has to be heated up to avoid all the horrors you can get out there. And the waiter goes round to Carl and he's like, "Have you got a salad sandwich?" Just white bread, you know, white bread. You know, you're like, and this thing came out, 2-bit white pan with some wet dead vegetables, and he looked at it and Carl, well, why did you order that, mate? You know, so and also I'll tell you the other thing is that demonstrates it, I think, is things like you know, his genuine fascination with the animals and the unusual looking people like that we've met along the way, like Baba in India or the Spider Sisters in series 3 with Warwick. And that when he was with the hippo in the house, he was like a kid in a sweet shop. He couldn't believe the luck of his life, you know, to sort of meet this situation, this creature. And then the balmy couple that were in charge of the hippo, like she said donkey, Jess, right, which in South African parlance is donkey, D-A-N-K-E, donkey. Thank you, Jess. Hippo.
Okay.
Donkey jizz. Around, right? I mean, that's a lot. You often see the camera start shaking on that show because he's just. But there's an example. You know, he reacts off what people say in the moment, doesn't he? As well as his other.
He does, yeah.
Carl is so. You know, how can you script ad-lib? I mean, he's more often not going off a moment or what someone said. So, yeah, I can confirm 100% that man, he is Carl through and through.
When you did your recce's and you were sort of like scouting the locations and the people, who were the sort of big characters for you who you thought would like create, you know, TV gold?
Well, I mean, I think anyone that looked slightly unusual was a good.
Because he talked so much about like the Elephant Baba, but he talked so much about the Elephant Man being his favourite film. So that's kind of a natural fit, right?
That's a natural fit. But you know, like his fascination with Spider Sisters, sort of that's on the edge of being possibly a bit awkward, isn't it? Because it's like, you've got to be sensitive, of course, and there's obviously a huge exploitation side of that in the reality. India is, you know, they're being sort of shopped around the place as a gawping act, you know, and of course there's a sort of taste and decency line, certainly when you're on Sky TV, that you've got to not quite go the wrong side of that. And I mean, somehow he navigates that line, like, because the way he drags Warwick up, and there was a time there when Warwick to me, he hadn't actually got Warwick on the stage yet, and he was going, "Come on, get fucking up here, Warwick!" And Warwick came up to me and went, "I don't know what to do, Luke." And I said, "Warwick, just do what you want to do. If you think he's been out of order right now, fucking tell him. In fact, it's quite important you do, because I need a bit of perspective on this scene, because he's out of control right now." You know, could you say this so we've got a bit of balance in the edit?
Oh God.
So yeah, I think that, you know, for us, the key to it would be lining up big characters and big situations that, you know, there's going to be material for him to work with, but equally that delicate line between, you know, good comedy and sort of fuck, what's going to happen here? That was the sort of the magic. I mean, to this day, actually, he and I, we're not that much in touch, but we text each other now and then, and it's mainly about Davram.
But he got on quite well with Swami, the guy in the robes.
Yeah, wasn't that amazing? Like, he was such a sweet little old fella, that guy. So that's a good example of gold. Like, we went on the Wrecking, we met 4 different Swamis. You know, there was a Canadian dude. He was a bit dry, a bit straight, a bit earnest. You know, we met another one who was sort of too into the Indian esoteric kind of mindset, and we didn't think he'd work when Carl didn't get it. And then we met Swami, who obviously we met Davram first, and we were like, this is looking good. This is looking really good. And then we met the Swami, who was the most sweet little laughing fellow. You know, we slept the night in the ashram on the recce, and he was just so lovely and never stopped laughing. And no matter what you said to him as a proposition, nothing was too big or mad for him. And I guess that he was almost so nice that we were slightly nervous of unleashing Carl's inability to get spirituality on the guy.
Yeah. It took a heck of a lot of planning and sort of things that you don't see then, going on that recce, and not just going on the recce and meeting a shaman, but actually going through 4 till you get to the right one, or what you think's the right one, which was perfect in the end.
No, actually, and talking of the planning, the other thing on that show was the phone calls, like trying to get a call from the right moment. And that, again, that was one of my... I'm very proud of having a live Ricky call whilst Carl was in a rubber dinghy with an old man crossing the Ganges, as he said, which was just gold. And the call was only about 10 seconds long, because he was like, I can't talk to you right now. I'm in a rubber dinghy with an old man in the Ganges. and Ricky just laughs his head off, and Carl hangs up. And you're like, wow, but it's live, it was real, and we got it.
Perfect. Oh, that's so funny.
But yeah, the logistics are unimaginable, I have to say.
My favourite Ricky call is when he's on that ship and he goes, the bloke who's driving it won't turn it down. He's sat here, I'm eating fisherman's friends.
And don't they start getting on about some barmy band as well? What was it? Some band that him and Ricky... I've never heard of them. I can't remember the name of the band. But yeah, that bedroom was mad. That's right. There was a band in there, and the toilets on the boat. Oh, that was so harsh, that boat in China. Oh, man.
Oh, God, I can't...
Bringing it all back to me. I mean, you do go through it a bit, I have to say, as a crew on this show.
Yeah, but it must be like a balance of amazingness that you get to go to all these places. I didn't know you'd been to India beforehand, actually, but you get to visit all these great places, but you're also kind of... must create so much difficulty as a director, kind of, because if you're directing in the UK, you're kind of in control of it, you know what's going on, but abroad it must make it harder, but also like a wonderful experience that you're getting to see all these unique kind of things.
Yeah, I mean, the trouble is, you don't really get to see much. You don't get to sort of experience it as a traveller or as a tourist might. You don't get a moment to take it all in. Because you're on your mission for the show, and like when you say, oh yeah, you met 4 different bubbers before you got the right bubber for Carl. That's basically a whole day of flying about in taxis and whatnot, bubbers, having the same conversation, and then back to a hotel room, knackered, going, right, what are we doing tomorrow? Okay, we're meeting 5 different donkey drivers.
And what were some of your highlights, Luke? So what were the standout locations?
Yeah, you know what? On Meet a Gorilla, when we went to that safari park, and basically Carl assisted the relocation of a rhino, that was mind blowing, because you obviously it's an amazing privilege to go to somewhere like that and see all those animals up close. But they had a little helicopter that the vets fly around in with the tranquilizer guns. Mm-hmm. And so that was our sort of secondary measure of control. That's the other thing with health and safety. You're like Carl up close to these wild animals and stuff, and then being Carl, it's all a bit. You've got to make sure there's measures for him not to get injured. And so I remember I got a ride in that helicopter at one point, and we were flying over elephants' trails and giraffes running through the jungle, and I remember just thinking to myself, wow, I mean, how can you call this work? So the jungle was a real highlight for me, actually. Yeah, it's surprising. Swimming with a great white shark was pretty out too, in terms of life highlights. Yeah, there was a few things you didn't see in the show. Like, you can obviously, Carl only went in it for like like 5 seconds. He was in it for he was in it for about 5 minutes, I reckon. And then, of course, he was out, and all he wanted to do was have a cup of tea and biscuits and blah, blah, blah. Have enough shots of the cage or the sharks, and so. But the director of photography, he did not like going in the water, so I volunteered to jump back in that cage with the camera.
Can't believe that.
Oh, wow.
This is what it's basically like a cage that's going up and down, attached to a boat, like you're in a washing machine. It's literally going up and down. All the water sloshing about, banging into the bars, and you've got your feet hooked on 2 bars at the bottom that hold you down, to actually, maintain stability. And one of those metal bars snapped off that was holding my foot down. I thought, fuck, the strength of this cage. And then a shark kind of, flew up, smashed into the cage, had a heart attack, yanked on the rope, get me out. But, it was an amazing experience. I wouldn't swap it for the world. So for me, things like that. The bungee jump was not a highlight for me. Being hit on the bungee jump, on a Soweto bungee nervous on that one.
You did it though, didn't you, Luke? You ended up doing it because that was all before Carl's bargaining with Gervais over if you do it. Where's this going to end? He's got more money than me.
Exactly. And then he was like, Luke, just put my hat on. You do it. Get some shots. But it was like, but Carl, he's going to see the fucking show, obviously. What are you talking about? But we did. That was one of my favourite moments. One of my favourite episodes, actually. And also, apart from the brilliant time where he's cooking for the African king, saying, I can't join this, Mark. I'm running out of custard. That was amazing. The fact he wanted to make him, I could still to this day, he talked about that, but he went, I'm going to do beans on toast. Was it beans on toast?
Beans on toast, yeah.
Beans on toast, man. It was so amazing, and he was so excited about that caravan. It was like, that's another example of him just being. It's so sweet, some of the things that get him excited and happy, and they offset the trauma and hardship of doing these shoots. In the Africa episode as well, you can see his genuine frustration where he builds that hut for the family that have just moved out, and he's looking at all this poverty, and he says, what am I meant to do? It doesn't feel like I've done anything. And I think for all of the hilarity of the series, there are so many beautiful, like, sweet, humanist quotes from him, and also like moments of philosophy, when he says in the Route 66 one, where part of the fun is the journey, this isn't my route, and also other silly little throwaway ones like, why is the Great Wall of China so great? The M60 goes to That's right. No, absolutely. He has these lovely like reflections on life and existence that are bedded in within all that comedy and humour. I remember him in Petra, Jordan, when we did that Wonders of the World one, when he was sort of gesticulating about inventions of past, like the spoon. I can't remember what his gesture was. He was like, as if he was trying to eat soup with his hands. He was going like, fucking spoon. And that's another thing, like the things you talk about off camera with him, like he has got some crazy inventions in his mind. And, I'm sure a lot of them have popped up in podcasts and things here along the way, but he'd be constantly thinking of new ways to do things or improve things around us, especially in those sort of third world countries or places that haven't got the comforts that we have.
What sort of things? Anything you could say?
Well, he's always got this thing about, like, he's always trying to improve the toilet situation. You can imagine on shoots that toilet facilities do become, and your personal toilet problems, as such as they may be, become quite a constant source of bonding. Definitely.
Can't imagine.
So, he would just be talking about toilets that were scented or had self-closed seats. Like in India, there were toilets that were literally. I mean, he and I had to share a toilet once at an airport, and we both had the problem, the inevitable problem of India, and. It was like, it was tricky. We were so bad that we were literally like shotgunning this toilet. He'd go in, then I'd go in, he'd go in, then I'd go in. I mean, I was doing that with him on a tiny little Canon G9 around my neck. Made the show, I think, where it was layer cake.
I hope you were well paid.
I think this is the only show where the talent got a worse deal than the runner. Like, this is definitely. I don't know if I could handle this. Luke, I want to ask you, because I genuinely think like this show is quite actually a pioneer and bit of tally, because obviously travel shows have always existed, right? Like Judith Chalmers or whatever. But the Travelodge, the Travelodge documentary with comedian as the host or the presenter with it. I feel like An Idiot Abroad was actually probably one of the first to do that. Now, like, there's loads of them, right? There's like A Misadventures of Ramesh Ranganathan, Travel Man with Rich Tayawadi, Jack Whitehall's Travel with My Father. How would you feel about being part of that sort of televisual sort of history? Obviously, I know you've travelled a lot yourself anyway, but what do you think it is about that format that is really appealing? And what is the success sort of down to? Obviously, now you work with on the amazing Gordon, Fred, and Gino, which is, I honestly, for my money, I could talk about that all day because I love Celebrity Chefs anyway. But I'd love to hear more from you.
Yeah, well, I suppose, I mean, it's true what you say. I think An Idiot Abroad was definitely, a genre-setting kind of benchmark, because I know for years afterwards, every time I went to a commissioner meeting at a channel, they would say, you'd pitch a load of ideas, and then they'd say, well, what we're really looking for is what would our version of An Idiot Abroad look like? And who would it be with, and where would they go?
Really?
How would we do it differently to that? And obviously, it had the absolutely fantastic sort of soft bullying aspect of Ricky, sending him out on these misadventures. Often it wouldn't be what he wanted to do, or he had to do all this shit to get to the thing he wanted, and then actually it wouldn't even be the thing he wanted, as in swim with dolphins. No, great white sharks, mate. Sorry, dolphins aren't around today. And so, that was such a lovely kind of format, if you want to call it such. In fact, I think there was actually. So I remember somebody saying in the office that there was a German version coming out with a German Ricky and a German Carl.
Really?
But,
really?
I think so. Yeah, I think it was Germany. But as to the sort of appeal of it, I mean, I think what's nice about it is that the traditional travelogue, where people like your Judith Chalmers or Palin's amazing, right? I love it, but there's only sort of so much of that style of doing it that you can take. I often wonder what's going to happen when Attenborough goes. Like, could we get Carl in that mould right there? And
it's quite interesting.
It's ready-made.
Because you've got to move it on, haven't you?
Yeah.
And it's sort of like we've had most of television history has been fairly traditional travel presentation. All of television up to An Idiot Abroad, pretty traditional travel shows. And then that came out, and I think with the new ones that are out now, like or the ones since, I mean, I have to say, Travels with My Father, I find it feels a lot more constructed to me.
Absolutely,
obviously,
I agree with that,
because there's less sort of I don't know. It's got quite a thin remit, hasn't it? Like, it's pissed off dad and Jack.
Yeah.
And of course, it's also totally dependent on the talent on screen. And I mean, I think that people really enjoy the dynamic of a group. Like Rob and Ramesh have got a great dynamic, and it's almost like An Idiot Abroad. You enjoy one of them setting something up, and then it gets a bit out of depth, and the other one's uncomfortable, and they that sort of discomfort swaps roles throughout the show. And I think that's partly the appeal of the way travel shows have gone more into seeing characters who behave in certain predictable ways we know and love in these situations we'd all love to be in too as a sightseer.
Absolutely.
They're watching people who are much more interesting than just your average tourist or even your average Joanna or Michael Palin. Carl accused Warwick of being Joanna Lumley when he was up the counter. It's like,
that was genuinely quite heartfelt and like sad to watch, though. That was like a real fist. He cries, doesn't he, Warwick, when he sort of climbs that temple?
Yeah,
I felt really bad about that.
What was it like, the third series, in comparison with the first two, having Warwick there? Was it easier or harder? Or because Warwick's kind of a bit of he does probably perform some of the role you perform with Carl, like calming down and things like that. Was it more enjoyable with Warwick, or was it not quite the same thing? It
was a little trickier logistically, because we had a whole extra, cameraman and sound person. We had to up our numbers, which always makes it a bit trickier. And obviously there was this whole tricky situation of getting a two-shot. If you want to sort of get them both reacting on one camera, do I go with him, or does Carl duck down, or do we lift Warwick up on sitting on? That was a constant sort of problem. But Warwick was, I have to say, absolutely incredible to work with. Like, his professionalism and his willingness to engage. And I mean, it's punishing, right? And he's used to a sort of film environment where you're looked after like a movie. And he kept saying to us, I can't believe how fucking real it all is. Jesus Christ. And the funny thing was, literally always eat pizza. We'd get back to a hotel and Warwick would get his pizza. And, like on that boat. So on that boat in China, when there was a band in their bedroom, and Warwick ended up getting an upgrade and he had his own cabin somewhere else in the boat. Carl got so pissed off about that. And of course, that started to affect how he related to Warwick, because things like that were happening all the time. That was, the ruse that Ricky had sort of obviously booked Warwick better accommodation, made sure he was getting better service. It's just another layer to the...
I always thought that Warwick kind of had... There's quite a pressured position to be in for Warwick, because he's been informed by Ricky. He says, you've got to be up for everything, right? You've got to do the Bollywood dancing. You've got to show Carl up, right? Because there's a lot of pressure there, right? Because you've got to... Even if you're not feeling particularly enthusiastic that day, you've got to go with it, because you know that you've got to be the out there one to Carl's straight man,
Yeah. Well, you know what? I think the thing that was really pertinent was that climb up the mountain in the China episode of Warwick, when he did start to cry. We had, there is a condition for people like Warwick, vertically challenged. Basically the dwarves have got all of their organs squashed into a chest cavity, which is, their organs are bigger than their chest cavity can allow for. And so, going to altitude it can be a real problem. It can be quite dangerous. And one of the things, he's so proud, Warwick, and he never wanted to ever let us down because he was tired or he couldn't do something. And so when he was struggling on that climb and he ended up going into the little carry basket, we were trying for that to happen because we just wanted to see Carl carrying on struggling. But this is the thing on this show, we would never sort of push it or force it. We would just sort of think, look, if we put some guys with a thing and Warwick gets tired, they'll probably end up carrying Warwick and Carl will be pissed off. And sure enough, Warwick started struggling, but what none of us expected was, he was genuinely upset that he wasn't able to walk up the mountain himself, And I felt really bad because Carl was miles up ahead, screaming at him, "You little loser! Come on, put your fucking back into it!" And he just thought, "Wow, that is harsh, Carl." What Carl couldn't see was like 200 meters down the path. It was actually bawling his eyes out on camera. And I thought,
no, bless him.
Gave the little guy a break, and in the edit, I think we had to carefully edit around all of that. But it's just a sign that it was a little bit extra challenging working with Warwick, but not for any reasons on his part. It was just it's just logistics. Another sort of dimension to engineering. Not that the scenes are engineered, but as I said, laying those things in front of them. Embrace and interact with, and that's the same with Gordon, Gino and Fred. It's kind of about setting a stage, putting characters and possibilities in front of them, and then letting it rip.
Let's talk about that for just a second, if you don't mind, because I love that program, and I genuinely think it's probably one of the funniest shows that isn't like a sitcom. That and Gogglebox, like just those three personalities are spectacular. Like Gino, I love Gino in particular. Just him getting absolutely off his tits in San Francisco, and when they went to Iceland, they were like doing the swimming there, and there's so much ego and competitiveness between the three of them. Were you involved, Luke? Sorry, I'm asking.
Were you involved in putting them three together, or just were you told that them three are going to be?
Well, funny enough, I was approached at the beginning, for a bit of consultation on how to do the show, but they'd already been paired as a trio. It was actually someone at ITV, the commissioner at ITV, who's worked with Gordon many a year, and then Gino's got his Italian show on ITV, who thought they'd be a great combo, and then Fred came into the mix, and Gordon, Gino, Fred was born. But so initially they weren't all buddies. Well, putting talent together, you don't quite know whether you're gonna how that will explode, and will they bond or will they blow up, or will it be really forced or will it be natural? I mean, that's the key, isn't it? It's when these relationships have natural flowing dialogue, and you sort of do the bits you need to do because you've got to give a viewer some geography and a bit of a narrative to follow. But it's the bits that happen after that where you go, right, just keep filming. Because you hope you can just keep going. And it's when they naturalise and go into their own mode that, you get the gold. You really get the gold. And that is pure ad-lib zone, more often than not.
Yeah. Do you find any similarity between Gordon and Carl in that sense? Like, they're very, very different people, but in some ways they're quite similar, like in their kind of shortness of temper. And, yeah.
Yeah, that's a funny one. That I don't know. I mean, I'd love to see Carl at a dinner party with Gordon. I'd love to see Carl beat those. That would be a nice.
Oh, well, that would be. Add Carl to Gino and Fred. Yeah.
No, I mean, they're not really. I don't know. They're just such different people to work with. I mean, if anything, there's some similarities perhaps between Carl and Gino in the observations they make and the energy with which they embrace, the funnier side of a situation. And also, I have to say, I mean, Gino's got a great, brain, the observations he makes and the little rabbit holes he goes down.
He's so up for it as well. My favourite Gino line is when he's on This Morning and he goes, if my grandmother would have been a wheel...
She'd have been a bike, she would have... If my grandmother would have had wheels...
Do you know what? If my grandmother was boat, she would have had wheels.
I think one of them, Holly or Philip said something like, "Well, if you'd put some more sugar in it or something, it would taste nice. If my grandmother had been a bike, she'd have had wheels." That's what he's replying. It's very funny. Did you got that gig? I'm sure you got that gig because you're very, very good at what you do. But I assume they came to you because they thought, well, you're the perfect person to do it because of your work on Idiot Abroad. You were so used to that travel.
Yeah, I think. I mean, I'd like to think so. Certainly, I think. I mean, Idiot Abroad is one of the credits. I'm most proud of, and it has. You do a certain thing for a certain period of your career, and then you do become sort of known for handling that kind of a show or that kind of a genre. So Carl sort of almost got me out of, the sort of Channel 5-esque, although I didn't do any for Channel 5. They were mainly for Channel 4, but the sort of freaky-mentary, got me out of the freaky-mentaries into, quality comedic travelogue. And that in turn launched me into ITV, entertainment, mainstream, 9pm. Cool, Gino, Fred. Thank you, Carl.
Where you want to be.
Well, I think that's a really nice note to kind of wrap things up.
Yeah, we've kept you for an hour now, Luke, so we really appreciate that.
Can I ask you one last question just to end on? I just wanted to ask you, what do you think it is, because our show's all about Carl Pilkington and like the legacy of him. What do you think is sort of the enduring appeal of Carl Pilkington, and why do people resonate so much with him?
God, the enduring appeal of Carl. Well, I think it is because he thinks what we wish we might be thinking. Like, because everyone wants to be funny, right? I think, you like to be the person who says something and it entertains the group, or there's a chuckle or two along the way. I mean, that's at a very base level. And then he sort of manages to find the funny or the alternative observational angle that you didn't see coming in a million years. And then as he explores his way down that avenue, it just keeps opening doors that you just can't believe are there. And it's just such a sort of engaging thought process that he goes on. And from where that thought process is triggered to where it ends is always a revelation with him. And that's whether you're having a chat, in a motorway cafe in India, or it's something that's happening on camera that he's doing with a Swami in an Indian ashram. And it's just an endlessly fascinating process. His mind is brilliant, I suppose, is all I can say. It's brilliant, it's sweet, it's funny, and it's not a performance.
So yeah, that was Luke Campbell. Lovely guest. I think just my initial thoughts of him. He was he's just very nice off air as well. Like, he wasn't just an on air show, and very forthcoming with his views. Very interesting person, and yeah, I loved it. What did you think, Miles? He
exuded enthusiasm and passion for his profession. Like, clearly a very, very skilled documentarian and director. But the passion, there's so he loved to work. Clearly, there was a real connection there and relationship with Carl, and just offered a really invaluable insight into the making of that show, which has become so iconic in its right. And can't believe that it didn't win a bloody BAFTA.
Oh no, it's crazy, absolutely crazy. But it was fascinating, his insight, just to get an insight into someone who spent so much time with Carl. And yeah, you're right. He's the sort of person, like, I get the impression he could be an on-air person as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, he could easily, if he had chosen to go into that, he'll obviously he's a very, very successful director, but he just came across like he could present as well, or be on camera, and that would be interesting. But it's just, he's gone into a different role. But yeah, fascinating person. And yeah, I loved it. And as I say to the audience, it was a bit different today because there was no link to the XFM shows, which is really the first show we've done where there's nothing directly linking to those shows. It kind of gives you an insight into Carl, which gives us a deeper insight into the XFM shows without this specifically being about the XFM shows, if that makes sense. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that was stage one. That was our first interview of a double bill of interviews, because next week we're going to be talking to Nigel Williams, who was the editor for The Office. He did a lot of Ricky Gervais's live stand-up shows, is an editor in his own right, and does loads of stuff for the BBC. So that will be coming next week. Please do let us know what you thought of our interview this week on all of the usual ways. So spinnerspodcast@gmail.com, or on Twitter, that's spinnerspodcast.
Yeah, and thank you. And we will be back with a normal show after that. So if you're sort of craving the normal shows as well, we'll be reviewing episode 45, I think it is, next, of series 2. That'll be the week after next. But we've just got these 2 interviews sort of bunched up together because they're just two. So you can't turn down Luke Campbell and Nigel Williams. You just got to.
And I love doing these interview shows. I think it's just such a different dynamic, isn't it? I just love listening to people. That's what I love about the beauty of podcasting, is that set something up and just listen to someone talk about a subject that they know absolutely loads more than we do.
So thank you, Luke, for doing it, and we appreciate it. Or another interview coming, I should say, next week. So tune in for that.
Do you think that Luke maybe could do on, what was his term, sort of facially challenged people? Do you think he could do a documentary on you by any chance?
He alluding to me by any chance?
We've got a connection with ITV now. I've got my eyes firmly set on a documentary about a little caveman, Brian Blessed
man
type.
who grew a beard alone in his flat. He's Gary Forrestal. He's surrounded by boxes with Amazon.
That alongside Rockbusters.
Yeah. Let's do it. But no, thanks, guys. See you next week.